pressure on businesses to hire people. We've got the same situation in Iowa here, where one of the utilities has to look at shutting down several coal plants, old coal plants, to comply with the mercury requirements that EPA requires by 2014. Utilities don't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars just to comply with that one rule. My question is, what can we do to either slow or change the direction of EPA so we do not run businesses out of this country?
We just keep bringing up my frustrations here. The cap and trade, and I often called it more descriptively cap and tax, did pass the House back in whatever year that was, maybe 2008 or so, and died in the Senate. That means Congress refused to act, even though they had Democrat majorities and a president that supported it. It means the will of the people was that we not have cap and tax or cap and trade. And yet the EPA is moving forward, and they've essentially said we're going to implement the basics of this through regulation. Remember the president saying during the campaign that you could still generate electricity with coal, but costs would necessarily skyrocket. It looks like some of this regulation that's coming from his appointees and the policy of his appointees is causing electricity costs to skyrocket. I don't think it's necessary. And how do we shut that down? We've done some things to try to bring amendments to cut off some funding going to EPA and the appropriations process. It's nearly, it's very, very difficult, and it's not impossible, it's very difficult to move policy legislation that stops them. Another thing that's easier is to bring an amendment to an appropriations bill that if we stick to our guns in the House and we're able to prevail against people that will disagree with us right now in the Senate, then we can slow down some of those activities. While that's going on, and we target one single activity of the EPA and say none of the funds shall be used to implement or enforce anything that might be construed as cap and trade. Then you end up with different definitions of what that means and a big fight about it. And if we draw the language carefully, maybe we can stop one little activity while a lot of other activities are going on. I guess the point is this, that if we have the ability to stop one thing, they have the ability to start 1,000 or 2,000 other, because they've got bureaucrats and administrators all over the landscape that can start rules, regulations, or interpretations of existing rules and regulations, and they can start more brush fires than we can begin to put out. So what we're in the business of doing is slowing down that activity to the extent that we can, preserving what we can of the, I'll say, common sense, free enterprise components of delivering energy, making all the arguments that we can so the foundation is there. And I'm hopeful that we'll soon have a president that will look at that and appoint someone to head the EPA that will go down through the ranks and appoint people that will be scouring those rules to put things back on an even keel. If there's anything that's a consistent objection that I hear, it's EPA. Our cattle feedlots, all of our livestock producers, anybody that's got a fuel tank, EPA regulations coming at them, and the idea that cap and tax is rejected by the American people through Congress, but implemented by an EPA that has a different set of belief system than I think the judgment of the American people. It's hard to stop. It's not a simple solution. It's more of a delaying action, and I'm going to stay engaged in that to the extent that I can, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it up. Yes, ma'am.
Do you see us ever getting back to a point where leaders, congressional, presidential, will revere the Constitution enough that because the EPA is not in the Constitution, is it? I mean, that we will not have, if the states want an EPA, fine, but these federal agencies are bankrupting our country. EPA is just one. Do you see that ever happening, where the discussion gets to a very basic level that we need to, this is not a federal level institution, it needs to go? Or are we too far gone?
I would never believe that we were too far gone. As long as we have breath and I believe in a cause, we're not too far gone. Things have turned around in this country, and they've turned around in history dramatically and on a dime. And I would remind you that of what has happened just with Obamacare. It was not the will of the people, it was the will of some of the members in the House and Senate and the President. And I could take you through that whole saga, but the result of it was 87 freshman Republicans, as the Founding Fathers designed, would be the quick reaction force to reverse this country's policy. And so can we do this with the EPA? With enough intensity, we can. It does, I think, take another election to be able to do this, is that because what I'm finding is that our leadership team doesn't want to have the confrontation necessary to impose the will of the House majority on the rest of the country. That was evident in the CR debate, it was evident in the debt ceiling debate, and it's going to be evident if we try to push the EPA issue much harder than we are now. I wanted to have those confrontations because it was essential for us to slow down this spending. To think that under the CR debate that we wanted to cut the spending by $100 billion, and it became $61.5 billion, then $38.5 billion, then a number that's so low it's embarrassing to even utter it. And while that was going on, we debated for over 40 days while we're watching the national debt go up about $3 billion a day. So roughly $120 billion in national debt accrued while we were cutting our spending projections by some number less than $38.5 billion. That's that funding piece. The people sent a new majority of the House of Representatives and reversed the large numbers of a majority that Nancy Pelosi had and provided a large Republican majority, bang, like that. And we are now a blocking majority that can stop bad things from happening. We're not yet a proactive majority that can make good things happen. I think we have more power than we've utilized. I think they backed away from that kind of a confrontation that was necessary, and I don't see another opportunity between now and the election to have the leverage that we had in the CR debate or in the debt ceiling debate. So I don't want to say stay tuned, sometime next month we'll get this done. I don't think the will is yet there, and it's going to take new faces in Congress and people with more conviction and more of them. Not happy news, but it's my frank opinion, which I think I owe you. Yes, sir.
Congressman, you've led kind of this effort to repeal Obamacare, H.R. 2, and got that passed in the House. One of the things, though, coming out of the election was the Republicans had adopted repeal and replace. Has there been any movement, if you are going to pull it out by the roots, as you like to say, what are you going to replace it with? Is there anything, has any legislation been offered to replace it?
There's legislation out there, yes. That just, when I introduced the repeal legislation at the opening of business the following day after the passage of Obamacare. And the next day was a Republican conference, which the message was, our message is going to be repeal and replace. I had a fair amount of heartburn over that because I believe we needed to win the argument on repeal before we could confuse the issue with replace. I didn't think it was hard to win that argument. I thought if we would have focused 2 or 3 months on repeal, 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 everybody would understand that, and then we could shift in midsummer, last summer, to what to replace it with. I spent almost a year on the argument of there's nothing to replace unless you first repeal, so let's repeal. So here's the things to do, though, on the other side of that. Just say, presuming that I get my way and we rip Obamacare out by the roots, which I do like to say, and it makes me feel better. And I want to see it done, and I'll be elated, I guarantee it. But here are some things along the way. Full deductibility of everybody's health insurance premiums and health care costs. Why does anybody have to pay with after-tax dollars when others are able to deduct those costs with before-tax dollars? Then the second one is sell insurance across state lines. The president said we need more competition in health insurance companies. I don't think he ever counted them. 1,300 health insurance companies existed going into Obamacare. There are fewer now. Some have gone under, some have consolidated. 1,300 companies, 100,000 various policy varieties that a person could choose from. But if you allow McCarran-Ferguson to stay in place and let state legislatures essentially give in to the local health insurance lobby and protect a quasi-monopoly within their states. Market shares, for example, One insurance company in Alabama, 90% of the market share. One insurance company in Iowa, I believe it's 70% of the market share. Now it was 60 when I was in the Senate. And it's not conducive to competition. I'd like to see all those companies compete against each other. I'd like to be able to see somebody from New Jersey buy a health insurance policy from Kentucky. If it saved them money, we'd have more people insured, not less. Third thing I do is address the tort reform situation we have in this country. That is something like, according to the health insurance underwriters, they gave us a percentage, and I did the math, and it came out with $208 billion a year. And that's the cost of litigation, the paying out the settlements and the premiums beyond the loss of someone who has been damaged by malpractice, and also the costs of defensive medicine, the tests that are unnecessary to protect from the litigation that's there. There's three pieces. We can do pre-existing conditions in a better way. If the federal government wants that to happen, subsidize the states then that have their pre-existing condition models like Iowa has, the catastrophic, what do we call it, Dwayne? Iowa's high-risk pool is what it is. The high-risk pool, that's pre-existing condition insurance that are taken care of by the states, and the federal government can step in and help with that. A number of those kind of free market solutions that are there. But now here's for me. This is what I would draw. I would take the health savings account legislation that's there, and I would expand that. Yeah, a couple that was, say, 20 years old when HSA was first passed could have put $5,150 into their HSA as a couple. Presuming, now everybody can't, they're not going to have the money to do this, but for those who will or can, and then it's adjusted by COLA. By time, if they spent $2,000 real dollars out of that a year for normal medical expenses and compounded it at 4% a year, which were real numbers before the economic downward spiral, they would arrive at Medicare eligibility with $950,000 in that health savings account. I would call it a life management account. And I would expect that they would negotiate for a high deductible, maybe a higher co-payment health insurance policy that would have a lower premium. They would also manage their lives with better diets and exercise because they're working this life management account to become their pension plan. And at the time we did this calculation, the liability for the federal government, the present liability of someone arriving at Medicare was $72,000 in health care costs for the balance of their lives, probably a little higher now. But $950,000 minus 2 times 72,000, $144,000, takes you down to around $800,000 left over. You have to make some inflation adjustments that would make that less optimistic. But I would say to them, if you will buy a Medicare replacement policy, you can keep the change of your HSA tax-free. That's part of your retirement fund. Can't we do things like that to allow people to empower themselves and encourage earning, savings, and investment, and health management and life management? That's what I want to do, and I think we could do it in this country if we just went out and marketed it. And sometimes it takes a president to make that happen. Sir? Any follow-up you like, or
No.
I just presume that's a subject matter you know a lot about, and I don't deny that. I think you do. But, no, thanks for your question. I appreciate it. I saw somebody else over this way.
Upcoming campaign, Congressman?
Oh, yes. Upcoming campaign.
I'll leave that very wide open for you. You can go whatever track you want to go.
Well, first thing is, I regret losing southwest Iowa. That area from roughly south of Highway 30 a little ways on down to the Missouri border. They are good people. Their lifestyle is a little bit slower than yours is here. But boy, they're good people. They're rooted in the soil, and we've made good friends down there. We've got projects going on, and I don't want to let those go. And first thing I did when the new map came out was went down that way and traveled through those communities and said, I'm going to sprint through the tape. I have the privilege to represent you for the duration of this Congress. That'll be the first week in January 2013. So that's job one. Plus, it's flooded all the way down there, and they need a lot of help now. Then you look at northwest Iowa. What Republican in America could ask for a better base than I'm standing directly in the center of right here? There's no better base in America for a Republican than right here in Sioux County. And I've had this discussion with some of those folks from, say, Holland, Michigan, for example. They think so, but when they look at the data, they have to kind of concede that this is really good. So the new district, we call it an Orbis rating, that's the tendency to vote Republican versus Democrat. the existing 5th is a 60-40 Republican Democrat. The new district, the new 4th district, which encompasses all northwest Iowa from, say, roughly Highway 30 up to Minnesota, and now this goes over and includes Ames, Fort Dodge, Ames, Mason City, on over to Chickasaw County, New Hampton. That's within 2 counties of Wisconsin. This new district is not 60-40, but it's 55-45. So it's the most Republican district left in the state out of 4. And it is, it requires then that I get out into those counties, 21 new counties, and 18 existing counties. So the 21 new counties is 55% of the population, and we've got to lay some groundwork out there. You got to get to know the economies, the educational system, and the communities. And we developed, I think, a reasonable feel and understanding for it here over the last few years. But that needs to happen there. And I'm looking forward to that. There's a lot of energy. At the straw poll on Saturday, we had a booth there, and it was a lineup at the booth the whole time. A tremendous amount of energy. And so I think that it boils down to this, that we need to do our job. We need to earn it. If we do all of that, we'll be fine. And I hope we can run a campaign based on the truth. And I've already said what I think I'm going to learn about myself that I don't yet know. Follow up though, Jim?
No, that,
Okay.
we'll conclude it there.
You
On
already
that
ran
topic.
Tom Latham out of the district.
Well, I want to say into the public record, thank you. Actually, I went over and thanked Kathy Latham here a week and a half ago because it was her that allowed that family to move out of the district and into a new one. And it was something that I never talked to him about. I didn't go to him in private and say, boy, Tom, I've got a great idea for you, why don't you move? That never happened. I just know that he's a smart man with a good set of values, and he would come to a good decision. And he did, and when he did, he came over to me, and that was on the Friday morning. Let's see, Terry Branstad announced that he would sign the bill on Iowa Press on Friday morning about 10:25 or something. 5 minutes later, Tom Latham was standing next to me saying, I've decided I'm going to move. That was good news. That's how that came about. It was a good decision on the part of a good man. And I wish him well, and I'll be happy to help him in any capacity that I can. He's done a good job when he represented Northwest Iowa and a good job of representing the existing district. And he'll do a good job in Polk and the southwest part of Iowa. Maybe he'll take on some of those flood duties and put on his waders down there. I saw another question back here. I don't know if it was Mick?
Yeah, I'd just be interested in hearing some comments on the deficit and all of the stuff that's going on right now, and specifically, I think, and correct me if you think differently, but I don't think that we can really tackle this thing without significant entitlement reform. I mean, we can try and chip off different pieces, but you know, that's where the big money is being spent, and that's the problem that we're seeing in Europe. And how can we pay out what we owe to the people we promised things to, and how can we fix it for my generation? And I want to be clear too, I'm not, when I say fix it for my generation, I'm not asking for more government handouts. I would rather you leave us alone, let us do our own retirement savings and take care of ourselves.
Well, you have a little Reagan, and I have a little granddaughter Reagan. They both have reddish hair, don't they?
Yeah.
That's pretty good, Mick. And you know, my hat's off to Paul Ryan for taking the lid off of the third rail discussion of entitlements. And it's a very, very tough equation to crack. And so he's put a proposal out there. I don't know if that's going to be the one we'll settle on. And it's sometimes I'll see something and I'll know right away this is the right solution. I look at that solution and I think, well, this is the best one we have out on the table now, but I'm not convinced it's the right one. But we do have to take a look at entitlements. And when you look at numbers such as now we have about 40 million people that are eligible for Medicare. 10 years from now, with the baby boomers coming on, we're going to be looking at, it's not 40, but 70 million people on Medicare. Even if we were able to control our spending growth here today, even if we'd done so last year, the year before, we still have deficits that are created by the millions of people. When you think of 30 million people coming on to Medicare and Social Security, it's at the same time, just simultaneous with each other, we can't get caught up with that. And that's one of the reasons that the Ryan budget shows a deficit of 23 trillion at the end of 10 years. So here's the debt and deficit equation is $28 trillion in national debt if we do nothing. Because of the debt ceiling negotiations, that cut 2 trillion out of it. So 10 years from now, we're looking at, if we get everything resolved in the super committee, cage match super committee, the 28 trillion becomes 26 trillion in national debt in 10 years. The Ryan budget's 23 trillion in 10 years. This is a problem that should have been addressed some years ago, and every day that goes by it gets harder. Yes, I think we have to look at the things that you talked about. We've got to look at income, we've got to look at ages, we've got to look at what we can accomplish politically. And I'd like to see us be able to allow you to own more of your future than you do today. And that's part of what I talked about with the HSA expansion. And hopefully we'll be able to get that blended into this in a way that, you know, I'll quote a Democrat. Jimmy Carter once said, wisely, that he believes that the people that work should live better than those that don't. I don't know that he ever followed through on that, but it made sense to me or I wouldn't have remembered it. And this society has drifted the other way. Now we're giving people that don't work a better standard of living than those that do. And it's just so wrong. And if I just divulge, or I'll say indulge myself a little bit more on this, Mick, some of the things that I just look at these equations. For example, Robert Rector did a study that showed that there are at least 72 different federal means-tested welfare programs, at least 72. There's a number that shows 77, but I know at least 72. No one can name them all from memory. We thought we reformed welfare in the mid-90s. It reached a little plateau for a little while, and then spending went up again. But when you think how this works, it was $23,488 a year is the annual cost to sustain a household headed by a high school dropout without regard to their citizenship or immigration status. Just a high school dropout, a family of 4. He calculated that that's $1.5 million over the 50 years that the taxpayers would subsidize that household. They'll draw down $32,000 in wages, and they'll pay about $9,000 a year in taxes. And so that's the number, that's the difference. Any illegal household will draw down a little bit less, around $19,000. For some reason, I think that's $19,488. And if I'm not pretty close, Cassie will make a face and then I'll know. But anyway, those are the differences. So, so look at what we have. We have 12 to 20 million people in the country illegally. At least 8 million of them are working, taking jobs that Americans or legal immigrants could be doing. They're still being subsidized by the taxpayer because if it's not, partly it's their children, partly it's they that are tapping in. It's more restrictive. Meanwhile, there are households, many of them in other places in the country, where they are into the second or third generation where there's not a single working male head of household. That whole household is completely subsidized by food stamps and rent subsidy and heat subsidy and the whole list of the things that go on in those means-tested welfare programs. So we're paying one family not to work at all with 72 plus programs. We're subsidizing another family that's working illegally with a series of federal programs. And we've got a double deficit going on in 2 households. And the value of a country needs to be, how do we improve the average annual productivity of our people? If on average, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that you have to work, but it means that if each of us on average have a higher average productivity, maybe you go out and put in an extra hour a week and now your productivity has gone up. Maybe Cassie's goes down a half an hour or so, but it's still a balance to improve your average annual productivity between the 2 of you. If we can increase that average in the nation in the same way, then we're more wealthy, we're more prosperous, we have more resources to work with. And the human capital that's being wasted in this country is just a devastating thing. Tens of millions of people are underemployed or unemployed. At least 20 million people fit the unemployed, underemployed category. We have people of working age, 80 million. 80 million people in this country of working age not in the workforce. Meanwhile, we've got 8 million working illegals. And people say that we can't get Americans to do this work. 1 out of those 10 that are sitting on the sidelines can go to work. And we can put more people to work producing more things. If we do that, we can come out of this economic problem that we're in. It is not about handing out food stamps, and it's not about handing out rent and heat subsidy checks, and it's not about extending unemployment and paying people not to work. This economy will not be driven by an economic chain letter of money borrowed from the Chinese and put into the hands of people that don't work, and then ask somehow or another this sugar high of the economy is going to go on in perpetuity. We'll recover when we produce goods and services of a marketable value that are competitive in the marketplace, domestically and abroad. It's production that will get us out of this, not consumption as a sole tool. And so that's maybe a good place to wrap this thing up, unless there's another comment or somebody that has a closing frustration they'd like to vent, even if it's Mick. He was a great friend, by the way, and we go back a long time. One of the people that, we talked about you on the way up, but I won't go any further with that. Oh yes, we also, in the back of the room, is a pledge that I wrote, and it's a pledge that we had down at the straw poll on Saturday. People came by and lined up to sign it, and it has my signature on it in red ink. It has Rick Santorum's signature on it in some color ink. I think it's red, maybe green. Blue, okay, odd color. And we are going to get it around for the other presidential candidates to sign. But I'll just read it for you and ask you if you want to sign it. We had to add it to the board. We ran out of room. So we've got a poster board hanging up here. And the pledge says this: I pledge to support the complete 100% repeal of Obamacare and will use every constitutional means available to accomplish total repeal. Further, I pledge my pursuit of the law's repeal will leave no doubt as to my commitment to see it stripped from the code, pulled out by the roots, sir, and leaving no vestige of Obamacare behind, so that it is, and this is the words from the bill, in quote, as if such act had never been enacted, close quote. I'd invite you to sign the poster back there. Jim did on his way out of the room, and we're going to collect as many signatures as we can, and maybe I can present that in Washington, D.C. one day. So, thanks for your attention. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being who you are in Sioux County and Orange City. Thank you very much.